Hi, I'm Danica Tormohlen, and I'm joined today by two executives from Ribbon. And Ribbon is a San Francisco-based tech company that offers turnkey SaaS platform. And we're going to talk a little bit about the company and also the move from physical events to a more hybrid format and digital expansion. And I'm joined today by Vinit Patel, and he's the co-founder and CEO of Ribbon. Hi.
Hello.
And Jimmy MacDonald, who is the Global Affairs Liaison Director, and he joined the company in April. Hi.
Hello, hi, good to meet you.
I want to talk a little bit about their story and why they're here today is because there was a recent announcement in August that IMC is working with Ribbon on Shop OJ, and I thought that was really fascinating. And the fact that you have done so many transactions already in the space since you launched in 2020 and started working with shows. As experts in the digital space, I wanted to talk a little bit about, from your vantage point, what do you think right now is working in terms of digital and physical integration that you're seeing with the shows that you're working with?
Yeah, that's a good question. What's working with the shows is really what's been working for a while in the consumer world, right? There's been a lot of transition from just the physical space to physical and digital in the consumer world, right? The Targets, the Macy's, all these guys, they've cracked that nut. And it's happening now in the trade show world and we're only talking about trade shows where there is some buying and selling of goods, stuff you can put on a retail shelf or hang on a wall, right? Those kinds of shows, the specialty foods, the gifts, the home furniture, and so on. Right? So those kinds of shows, they're moving to the omni show, the omni channel, as you might call it, where basically buyers, they just want to be able to buy from it's up to them. We're not disrupting anything at all we're doing is we're just taking something from the consumer world and putting it into the trade show B2B world because that's just the habit that they're getting used to. All the pandemic did, it just accelerated it and it made it like a thing. This is here to stay. That's all the pandemic. So we really haven't done anything beyond that. Took it and put it in the trade show world. And now that buyers are used to it, it's easy for them to transition. So that's really from our vantage point. When you talk about physical and digital, it's just the habits that are being transported in one way they used to shop to the B2B side. That's really how simply we look at it.
So taking that consumer experience and making it accessible for the B2B space.
Correct. Yeah. Exactly. Yeah. And there are some nuances in that. You have wholesale orders, minimums, there's a show season, all those other business rules and a few other nuances around it. But essentially at the core, that's what's really happening as a trend in the trade show industry.
To add to that a little bit, what I think is quite interesting as well with the pandemic period, what it did was it accelerated the testing of all the other different types of models for going digital. So like the virtual was attempted, the digital showrooms without transactional was trialed. So lots of different models have been tested. And now that everyone is super focused on back to the face-to-face event, the hybrid has found its home in this sort of transactional end, just like aiding that face-to-face experience and literally concluding the visitor experience. So I think COVID was great because we ripped through 10 different models and have come to the right one.
It accelerated for sure, and then forced adoption on the digital side. We've been talking about this on the trade show side for years and known that digital was going to be part of the future. But getting people to actually use it, participate, was the thing that was lacking, and that it really did force us. It's certainly a silver lining from my side of the pandemic is that digital comfort level.
Yeah, adoption, yes.
The comfort level and the technology is also caught up. It's a lot easier to adopt. It's a lot easier to set up. All those things factored in.
Now, I also want to ask, when you look ahead, what do you see as trending? So think about from the consumer side, what are some of the things that are trending that you think that might translate into the B2B side for the digital and e-commerce.
So what's trending? What's going to translate from the B2C side to e-commerce?
That's a big question.
Yeah, the trends start with some type of behavior, right? They don't just come out of the blue. There's always some forcing function that creates it or kicks off a trend. From the exhibitor point of view, and the kind of shows that we're talking about, regardless of what's trending or not, what they care about is, am I making sales? That's number one. Am I getting orders? That's number one. And am I getting leads? Right? For them, that becomes the forcing function. Now, if I'm getting leads by just physical traffic, that's cool. Now, if I'm getting more leads through the digital traffic that's coming through, that's even better. So that creates that forcing function that pushes out a trend where they start asking for, what's your digital piece in this whole trade show? Do you have anything going on? If you don't, then maybe we need.
Why not?
And we've started seeing this with a lot of trade show organizers who've been slow to adopt. Did you know how to sell boots? They don't know how to adopt digital as seamlessly. And it's the exhibitors who are telling them, look, we know we want more leads, we want more return on our investment. What are you doing? So now it's the organizer that some of the slow moving organizers, some organizers like Jimmy are way ahead, but some of them are behind the curve. But now the exhibitors create this forcing function where it's, okay, what's your digital strategy? Are we going to get more leads compared to last year? And that creates the impetus for things like scanning with the QR codes, the buyer's able to scan your booth. And if it goes into things like the metaverse, maybe 2 years from now, it's all going to come back to how many leads am I going to get, right? Or how many sales, how many orders can I write? So that's been the forcing function for this trend of digital adoption.
I think we're also, in a positive sense, we're pushing water uphill a little bit at the moment. But I think there's going to be a tipping point where it's going to be so ubiquitous to have B2B as part of the value prop for a trade fair that there will genuinely be some excitement from the organizer's perspective when they realize the massive potential new revenue stream there is with B2B that there isn't with something like hybrid, like virtual. So virtual was like an additional overhead for a show. B is a new revenue stream. So when they get over their adoption issues, they're going to be quite excited, I think. We have to take the time, do the education piece and get there.
And you're right in terms of e-commerce is still very new in the trade fair industry. Yes, that would be like the holy grail, right? If we can somehow have our exhibitors and attendees use our platform and have 365 experience with our customers, not only a few days of the year, but then it's how to do that and how to do that in an easy way to increase adoption so that exhibitors actually use it and so that attendees actually use it.
We've totally cracked that one because one of the first things I mentioned to Vinit when we were first discussing the platform, and which we've really worked to ramp up, is that the visitor registration for visitors to the show is actually integrated into the marketplace of the fair.
That is huge. That is huge. That's a big factor to make it a lot easier. Yes.
They're already in. They don't even know they're in it. They're already in whilst they're registering. So they have that one profile and one QR code that travels with them across their physical and digital journey. Done. That's how you get over the adoption thing. And it's web-based. It's not an app. So no one needs to download an app. And when they're scanning the QR codes, visitors and exhibitors of each other's booth or each other, it's QR code based that can be done on your regular phone. It just prompts you to sign into the profile that you already have.
And that's the other thing, right? Having it on your phone that you're already carrying with you. And a lot of people, even during the pandemic, I would say that's another silver lining, is that people are much more comfortable with the scanning of QR codes. And then
Yeah.
also they're much more comfortable with using, a lot of shows didn't have badges in the last year and a half. Away from that for cost, having contact with a person, and a lot of shows, you just show your phone to get in.
Yeah,
It's the way forward. It's just totally the way forward. The biggest show in the world for interiors is the Milan Furniture Fair, Salone di Mobile. This year, QR code only. Every year prior, it was like badging with like little strip that says buyer on it, and badges are flapping around and you can't read them anyway. It's very yesterday.
All at the Swim Week, Miami, all three shows there was a swim show that we did. Then there were two other shows, Cabana and the Hammock Show, all of them, no badges. So now it's the physical, digital. It's like Tron. There's no Sam Flynn just goes from the physical getting a little nerdy here, but that's how it is. He doesn't know. It gets into this other world, and it's the same body, and he's able to do stuff. They're able to go in and out. One login, one.
This has to stay in the cut, right?
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned some of your clients, and not everybody who is watching is as familiar with Ribbon. So tell us about some of your biggest clients. I said I reached out. I wanted to interview you guys because you have the deal with IMC, which is a huge show organizer here in the US. So tell us about some of the other shows that you work with.
Yeah, definitely. We work with shows in three categories. That's home and gift, apparel, and the art category, right? So to name a few in each of the categories, in the home and gift, it's Shop Object in New York. In the apparel, it's Swim Show, and art, it's art fairs, it's Art Dusseldorf. Yeah. So those are three shows. There are other shows in Canada, for example. There's a show coming up called The Edit. Now, The Edit is a really interesting experiment. It's the first time Canada is going to have this type of very highly curated show in Vancouver, and that came out of this whole idea of the exhibitors wanting a digital, because some of the newer vendors, some of the newer exhibitors coming on, they only know digital, right? Some of them don't even know trade shows. So for them to launch something, if you just launch a traditional physical show, it's going to be like, what is this? So it's launching with physical and digital together, and so that's another example of a very interesting model that's coming up, and they're going to launch with digital first and then physical. So it's almost the opposite.
Yeah. When is that launch?
That's happening in February.
I think the Art Dusseldorf one was very interesting because that was our sort of first inroads into the sort of art world that I know fairly well. But with them, Art Dusseldorf is part of Montgomery Arts, Angus Montgomery Arts. And what's interesting there is that they have multiple shows all in the arts. So like Art SG, a show in Hong Kong, Singapore Contemporary, and each of those shows have a physical ecosystem of visitors and exhibitors. The minute you create the digital platform for each, then they can share audiences between all of their shows across the planet. That's exciting. So suddenly your 10,000 Art Dusseldorf visitors become buyers or collectors or viewers of the Hong Kong show's digital platform. And it's all within your own ecosystem. And what I liked about Ribbon when I first encountered it was that having your own marketplace, but within your own ecosystem, that you can send your own traffic to your own marketplace rather than to a third-party marketplace makes much sense.
Yeah. You can keep it and then also expand your the buyers for that can have access to the other events. And then on the flip side, every exhibitor can have access to those buyers from across the world, right?
Yes. And travel is not back up to where it was.
Especially international.
Especially international. And if you think specifically Asia, I launched a show in Singapore. It's coming up soon, actually. But I set up the launch of a show in Singapore called Find Design Fair Asia. And one of the big reasons why that was instigated was because of the China issue, with China being locked down repeatedly. So the traffic there, like Asian market being very important, not being able to go and do a show in China is a bit of an issue. So doing one in Singapore, anyway, so if you had the digital element, you could start to overcome problems as well as growth.
Yeah. Okay, I want to take a step back. People can become a little bit familiar with you. So I am really curious about your origin story. How did the company get started? Why are you in the trade show space from the tech side? So tell us a little bit about that.
I'm a engineer. That's my background. Not a very good one, but that's my background. That's why I'm very interested in the tech side of the business. From the business side of the business, I come from an exhibitor background. So there was a time when there was me and another friend of mine. We used to make these home decor goods. Here's one actually. These are like pen and ink painted goods that we put into retail stores. And we realized that the new emerging designers weren't really getting a lot of feedback on whether their products would work or not at retail stores. At the time, started a wholesale marketplace called SKU. So anyone, any emerging designer could basically hop on, and for a fee, they could get a guaranteed response from a retailer. They could be from Target or from the MoMA or any of these stores about whether their products would work or not at their stores, and if they don't, then why not? That was feedback that these exhibitors really wanted. So it went from there. These were the emerging exhibitors, and then there was this other side. We caught the attention of the established exhibitors and also the showrooms and trade shows. They saw the B2B trade show model where it was breaking down these barriers between the retailers and the exhibitors, and they said, hey, can we have a model like this in the trade show world? You get the feedback, and people go to trade shows that you do get that one-on-one feedback, right?
Yeah.
And then but the e-commerce side is something you can introduce at the trade show level. Yeah, that's a huge opportunity. I don't even know why it hasn't been done yet. That's so that's where it started. That was Ribbon's origin, and part of trade shows are also showrooms at the international market centers. They also wanted a solution, and it's all a connected ecosystem. So that's how Ribbon came about, to meet that need.
And Jimmy, how did you land at Ribbon? So
That's a
little
longest...
bit about your background for people who may not know your background.
Fine. I studied interior design in London. And on my graduating year, my wife was doing product design. And we set up basically a graduate show for product designers. And we had about 250 designers from across the UK presenting product. And we didn't know that we had just started a trade fair. We were just doing an exhibition. So we did that first. And then we were invited by British Council, which is a leading British establishment here, to do a kind of emerging designers and talent showcase during the Milan Design, which for us was a massive score. We were like 27, and that was a big deal. So we did that. And then the tipping point where it became quite a lot more commercial was when the largest trade fair in the UK at the time, called 100% Design, invited us to do a more trade-ready, curated mix of emerging companies and design studios. So we did that. We got good recognition for that. We then did our first joint venture with Reed Exhibitions, who owned that exhibition, because we said we wanted to do a show that was exclusively for emerging designers and studios, but at scale and international. So we did that, and that went very well, but a little bit too well, because it took the shine off the now slightly tired show that didn't have all the cool emerging designers anymore, because they were at our show. So we terminated the JV with Reed Exhibitions, and then set up our own show pretty much the next day without them. And that kind of grew, and the emerging element became like very established companies wanting to join our exhibition. And then following on from that, I then started dealing more or less exclusively with trade departments at countries. So I would go to the Swedish government trade department and say, we want those companies to come to our show, and you should fund them because we've curated the correct mix. And they would proceed to do so. We ended up with a show. It culminated in being the largest show in London, called the London Design Fair. And it takes place during the London Design Week, which we call a festival in London. And then it peaked. I felt I'd done everything I ever wanted to achieve with that show. So I sold it in 2018 to Diversified Business Communications Limited UK, which is an American media group with a much longer name in the UK. So I sold it to them and I stayed on for a couple more years. And then I left in December 19, and I bought some shares in a Danish e-commerce platform, specifically and only for collectible design, the sort of highest end of sort of design art. And that was very interesting, but I soon realized it wasn't really scalable because it wasn't a SaaS business. It was just an online shop and it was for art. So it had limited stock levels, should we say. So I was very interested in the digital all along. And then I was out of my no-compete period, so I was kind of thinking, oh, maybe I should launch another show. But I knew straight away that I wouldn't launch another show without having an oven-ready marketplace as part of the new value proposition for the show. So I think, and actually during this call, I've been thinking a lot more that it's ideal for people who are about to launch shows to integrate it from the get-go. Yeah. I think there's a lot of shows that haven't really thought the digital piece through before they launch. So if anyone was launching now, my thing to them would be to absolutely study the digital element before you start.
Great advice. It has been an afterthought, but to think about it while you're putting it together.
Yeah, but that kind of emerged during this call, actually. So then I was looking for the correct e-commerce platform, and a friend of mine, Jesse, in New York, he had a brilliant show called Shop Object, which you know of. And I excitedly called him up and said, dude, you've nailed the e-commerce platform. Can I have a white label, please? and then he rapidly said, with regret, it's not mine. It's a company called Ribbon. So I contacted Vinit and it just went from there. I understand the market. We're trying to explain the product to, essentially. That's my role. And hence my crazy job title name. But it is exactly that. It's liaising with the exhibition companies and the show organizers and taking them on that journey. So it's probably the most accurate job title I've had.
Yeah, that's critical because it has been understanding the trade show model, merging the tech with the physical, and then thinking about people that put on. I think another thing that we've learned too is people that put on events are not necessarily the people who can run a digital platform or a digital even event. So you need that expertise in that area, but then a way to merge the two together.
Yes, exactly. We have encountered the kind of slight pushback on a resource level from some shows. Like, we'd love to do it, but we don't have the resource. So there is that element that they need to, the bigger organizers almost need to have a digital department that services many shows, because the directors and the show organizers themselves they're only worried about square meter sales or square footage sales until they really get with the program. So until then, and shows aren't totally back yet, as they were, I can see why it'll be a longer game, I think.
But if you look at all of Reed, for instance, Emerald, all of the major companies are investing in digital. Whether it is buy or build is where we're at right now.
Yeah.
And a lot of, I would say, those are the big guys. Most show organizers are not like that and don't have that depth of resources to be able to build
Yeah.
And even if you're working with IMC, they're a big company that has their own in-house digital as well that they've invested in.
Yeah. And they're huge believers of the Omni show, the Omni channel. And coming from such a big organization, it's almost, there's your evidence that it's going to become mainstream. That's where the organizers need to take the cues.
I was just going to ask, in terms of when you work with in IMC, let's just take that particular example and walk me through how it works and what the value is for their exhibitors and attendees, and then also for the show organizer, right? They're gonna get a cut, I'm assuming, of either the transaction or the fee to do that. So it's expanding their revenue stream, right? So talk a little bit about how that works on a high level. I don't need you to get into pricing and percentages or anything like that, but how does it work?
With the IMC or
show?
You can talk about any show, but sometimes it's easier to talk about a specific example.
Yeah, the IMC, the Shop Object New York's been on for since 2018, and they adopted the digital they partnered with us in 2020. They actually, with Jesse, who's one of the co-founders of Shop Object, we were in conversation before the pandemic, almost a year before the pandemic. We could see that this is going to happen. Not the pandemic, but that shows are going to go this way. That we were already talking about it, and we already had the groundwork laid out. And so in 2020, we were ready to go. We started there. It was fully online at the time. So from a revenue standpoint, they could still keep the revenue because now they could charge for people for these booths online instead of offline when the shows were canceled. When the shows started coming on board again, when it came back to the physical world, now they had this extra value add. With your booth, you also get the digital component where you can get more sales. So that was the extra value add that got more revenue. And there was also the online only. Now, if a brand was somewhere else in some other country, whether in Japan, they couldn't come here because of international regulations or travel, it could be online only. So that was another revenue stream. So that created multiple revenue streams for, say, a Shop Object like show. That was something that the IMC, as one of the forward-thinking organizations, following the omni-channel, the omni-show approach, they started seeing that, they saw the value of it, and they acquired it. And I've known the guys at IMC for a while, and we have a good rapport, and they were like, you guys just continue doing what you're doing, and let's continue building on the platform. We got to continue to build the sales for the exhibitors and find more ways for them to engage and get more leads. Even after the IMC engagement, that's been the path forward. So it's heading in a direction where it's the exhibitors come first, making the buyer experience really seamless, and just continuing on that journey of getting that execution really right. I think that's one of the things that's missing in the adoption.
Mm.
So that was the key. So that's in a nutshell explains how that whole journey took place.
So from a show organizer's perspective, the obvious thing is if you are growing a brand towards an exit, if you have the digital component already included in that, your multiple on your exit is much higher, right? Because you got a new scalable beyond the four walls of your exhibition grounds or venue selling opportunity with very high margins and low risk, right?
Yeah.
So as long as you continue to grow your audience for the brands, you can add as many brands as you like, obviously within the definition of curation. But the opportunity to grow it infinitely and also have a digital platform that gets you a much higher multiple, that's really important when you're building a company.
And I'd also want to, from the just purely organizer's point of view, all the activity that was happening at the show, the organizers were completely clueless. There were surveys, you do surveys and stuff, but that's whatever people answer, right? This is data coming out of the show. It's real. It's the truth. It's a true source of data that it's undeniable. If an exhibitor is making a sale or not, they're getting a lead or not, buyers are coming in, whether there's shopping online only or offline, all that stuff, right? That was data that was completely unknown to all the organizers. Yeah. It just getting that just makes them better. It just makes them more intelligent and able to tweak their shows in ways that they could never do before. And that's a huge advantage.
Plus.
Talk about that data and some of the things that you're able to provide show organizers in terms of dashboard. And then I'm sure it obviously helps with re-sign and showing, because ROI is always an issue. And people, they look at leads, or some people look at other things. And so talk a little bit about the data that you do provide to show organizers that you're able to gather, and then maybe some of the things that they're able to do with that.
Yeah, I think that's a key point, right? To give you an example, there are just a few data points that are really interesting. Okay. One is just from an online purchase, right? Just from fulfilled and partially fulfilled orders. These are completed transactions. Those over a period of 4 seasons, if you take from 2020 to 2022, they've been increasing by 30% season over season. That's huge. That's something that we had never imagined. The other thing is if you're doing online only versus on-site, where it's on-site and online. On-site and online is actually 5 times more sales than you would get if you were online only. And part of the reason is because the buyers are there, you can upsell them, they know you, they can start a relationship on the spot. So that's a very interesting metric. And the other thing would be in terms of online only, like buyers who are buying online, it's 40% of buyers are buying online, which is some of these numbers might be skewed because of the pandemic, because it was 100% online. Now, if you look at data over 2 years, it's 40% are buying online, which is huge. It just means that buyers are getting comfortable with it. And there was a survey done by Emerald, and they found that 83% of buyers see the online buying as a thing of the future. They actually surveyed all these guys, and now we can correlate that with actual data. So it's not, they might be saying 84%, but it's 40%. So that's where it gives you a source of truth. That is super interesting.
Yeah. And Jimmy, what, from your perspective, when you're talking to show organizers as the global liaison, what are some of the selling points when you're talking about the data and what you can offer?
There's a couple of elements. So from the sort of curation or the selection of exhibitors, you can see who the visitors are actually clicking on and adding to favorites. So if you had, like I had, 500 exhibitors, it's very difficult to know which exhibitors are fulfilling your visitors' interests or needs. All you see is people walking around and people standing on stands. You have no intel to know if stand number 10 is popular or if stand number 12 is popular. So being able to see the online traffic is super interesting to go, oh, they really like that. Maybe we either need to like add a new segment of audience, or we need to change out the exhibitors. So why not just get a new segment of audience to service those exhibitors that we haven't yet reached yet? Who do they really need? So then you can do like a real survey on those exhibitors and say, okay, so we're not sure if we're getting you the visitors you want. So we need you to tell us more accurately which visitors you need. So you can actually start segmenting your exhibitor population, knowing that most design shows are quite a broad school of interest. So there will be there's some brands that will appeal more to architects.
Right.
And there'll be some brands that appeal more to an interior designer, but they're both in that sort of built environment sector. So you think getting any of them in is good, but not if you're putting the right brands in front of them. So that's very interesting, which then would make your show naturally more successful if you're delivering for both sides. So I think that's a good example where the analytics is mega valuable.
And can they pull a particular exhibitor and say, I see you've done $10 million in sales through this app. And then I also see that you generated before the show, so many people came in and looked. And can you also set appointments at all in the?
Yes. Yeah. So for example, like if a visitor is hovering over a brand and checking them out for like more than 45 seconds, they get a request to connect. So there is some, without being pushy, they can just shut it and carry on and not connect. But there's a request to connect that they can just close or go, yeah, that'd be great, actually. So there's that functionality. It's there, but it's not pushy, right? So it's all choice driven at every point. There's loads of very interesting things. Like we can see how many orders people are taking. We can see the status of all the orders.
The locations where they're from too.
Yeah, so we can see all of that. We can actually see the products of a brand could have 50 products on the stand, but they might have 1,000 on their marketplace profile. So they can sell like old stock, so to speak, but they can show their whole inventory. What they bring to the show might not be what sells. Suddenly they know that from their inventory, oh, next time we should put this on the stand because that's what went on to sell later online. That's super powerful
information. Yeah.
So in that market, this was the product that worked.
So how easy is it for exhibitors to load all of their products into the system?
A CSV file upload.
Really?
Yeah.
That's a
Okay.
CSV file, or there's also things like a direct upload. If you're on Shopify or some of the popular platforms, it just can just stream it in. That is one of the ease of use pieces.
Because that's been an issue, right? That exhibitors, I don't have time to deal with that either. Same like show organizers. I'm focused on the physical. I can't deal with the virtual aspect of it. And so having a robust marketplace that actually has a lot of products has been an issue before.
Yeah, I think there are two things that have changed. One is the ability to stream from whatever B2B that you're using, making those CSV uploads a lot easier.
Okay.
And for the guys who are like, I don't have time for any of this stuff, we're like, look, we'll do it for you.
Yeah.
It's
Okay.
it's just a small fee. Oh, really? Wow, that's it. That's great. So they'll just pay like an extra fee, or they'll just use our support and get it done. Right. So the technology is also improved, and it's also getting better in getting all these files into the system and also keeping them updated.
I was looking on your website, and the idea of Ribbon's mission is to make all fairs shoppable. What sectors does it work best in? You were talking a little bit earlier about the product heavy, obviously, sector. So the gift, apparel, interiors, furniture.
Fundamentally, it's anything that you can put on a retail shelf. Start fundamentally with that, and then what you can put on a wall, and then you expand out of that. Things that you can buy and sell, that physical things. So it could be a specialty food. You have, of course, you got apparel, you got furniture, you got home and gift, you have art, and then it could expand to bigger and bigger things. Right now, this is already a very huge market, but for trade shows that are even selling medical supplies and so on, that starts to expand the market. You have books. So, ultimately, any fair, even if it's like a college book fair that has a flyer saying, look, we're going to be at the Alameda High School on the 15th. If you cannot come, just go online and select your books. That's how easy it should be to get all the product inventory in there, and then extend the show for people who cannot make it, or even if they can make it, cannot look at all the cool books that are out there. So it could be set up in a few different ways. It doesn't have to be all the books. It can be a selection of the best ones. But the idea is that all the fairs, they could use the online commerce component just to expand the market, to expand their audience, and to make it more easy for the attendees to engage. That's what we mean by all fairs shoppable.
Are you working with any consumer shows at all? I know, for instance, let's say like a Reed Comic-Con, they have a lot of products as well, and their exhibitors might have products that are more consumer based.
We're talking with Raccoon at the moment, and they do running shows both in the UK and the US. And so that might end up being our first sort of sports vertical. So any show, again, it works very well for product, but those are mostly consumer shows. So it means that we could service a consumer show just as easily as we can at B2B. We just turn off the order limits and we turn off the number of units. It's just a single sale and there's the price. So that it makes it really easy because we can just turn off and on various functionality.
So what are you looking forward to like this fall? What do you have coming up like in the next 6 months in terms of shows and maybe even new features or things like that? I want to end it with that question. So I want to look and see what's ahead for you and what are you excited about?
One of the things that we're excited about, let's say in the next 6 months, especially, yes, we have all the trade shows, the e-commerce is running very smoothly, but in certain shows, the art fairs, a lot of the galleries, a lot of the artists, they know of NFTs. They don't know how to execute on it. And that's one of the exciting things, because a lot of stuff you hear about NFTs is very gimmicky. It's something that's out there. Somebody drew something and then because of the hype, it got sold. But with art and with the galleries, they're actually making stuff that's being sold in a limited edition in the physical space. They'll have 30 copies of one of their photographs or one of their limited edition run clothing or whatever that is. But it's never translated so seamlessly into the digital world where you could have 30 signed copies on the blockchain of your piece that you've created. And that's one area that's like an extension of e-commerce that we're very excited about.
Yeah, that is exciting. One thing that I thought was interesting about that NFT side of it is that the artist or the creator continues to get residuals off of that even after you sell it. So that's just fascinating to me. And how NFTs will change the industry is interesting. There's already shows that here in the US, Gary Vee, he sold NFTs for attendees to be able to get into his show. And then it lasts for 3 years and people can resell it and as a price of admission type of thing.
Oh, the price of admission. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, the attendee side, whatever the going rate was at the time, and then they can resell their tickets. It's a 3-year ticket, but they can resell it.
Oh, okay.
It's so fascinating.
That's cool.
That's forcing adoption. I like that. It's a clever strategy.
Yeah. So what are you excited about, Jimmy? What do you have cooking
Well,
in terms of shows and things that you're working on?
I've been a model that's slightly, what I'm discovering is slightly unique to the US market is the sort of permanent showrooms with alongside trade fairs. We don't really have that in Europe. And there seems to be a bit of an explosion in people planning to create new ones in various parts of the world. And we're talking to a couple of those at the moment. So that excites me. It's like the natural evolutionary step of a trade show to end up with permanent showrooms. But I think there's a 3.0 opportunity to get it right from the get-go. And as you rightly said, IMC have their own platform, but they're also working with us. So like, obviously there's issues and things that they're willing to test and challenge and try. And those learnings can be applied elsewhere.
That's exciting if you can also have the opportunity to, say, for instance, launch some showrooms and have that digital component already baked in, like you were talking about before, like thinking about it all as a whole package, right? Not a digital extension or an after thought. It's all together to start with. Yeah.
That to me is exciting. And it's that sort of omni-channel visitor experience and how you link the two, the temporary spaces with the permanent, the digital with the online only brands. How does it all come together? It's super exciting.
Yeah, it is. Okay, I'm going to ask you one more question because I just thought of it when I heard you mention on a podcast about some of the sales that were generated from one event. You don't have to name the event or anything, but I heard a term thrown out there of 6.4 million in sales through Ribbon for the event. So tell me about that. And was the show organizer just so thrilled?
Yes, the organizer was very happy with that. Yeah. Look, it comes down to the quality of the event. So Ribbon was the enabler in that. And we're super excited that particular organizer did that well with the platform. But the way they used the platform, they optimized it in every way through their newsletters and their marketing communications to drive traffic through it. They took every advantage of having it. It wasn't something that was like bolted on. It was something that was like, no, this is our strategy. It's part of our business now. So that's why they got the return they did. And what we have seen as well is with, I think also that particular show is there's obvious peaks at the time that their show is actually live and happening. But the sort of, let's call it the flat line between the shows, it's lifting. So there's less of a dramatic drop-off of activity after the show. Mm-hmm. It's starting to enable ongoing sales between the shows and reminding people to buy from those vendors or exhibitors. So the show is just doing better and better, therefore. It's exponential.
Yeah, and I think those are mostly the reorders between the shows.
Yeah, it is.
Big time for reordering.
But that's just so exciting to be able to capture that and to know real value from the show, real orders. I've even seen it even recently where people are taking like paper orders from the exhibitor's side and to have that actually electronic and to know what kind of sales are happening on your floor and throughout the year is incredible.
It's very exciting. From an organizer perspective, Ribbon was literally like a candy store when I saw it. So this will sell. Okay, I will join.
You can see the value and where people are investing
Yeah.
going forward. But obviously it's a crowded marketplace. There are lots there, as I'm sure you have seen as you have gotten further into it, is there's so many options available and so many companies that rushed into event tech, especially during the pandemic.
Yeah, that's actually a good point. The way that we rushed into event tech was never thinking about it as a virtual only replacement. That was never on our minds. From the get-go, we were like, no, this is just virtual is a thing it's there because of a certain environment. The pandemic, it's a certain environment. That's why people are doing virtual. But intrinsically, people are social animals. There's no way we're just going to be doing this virtually. That was known from the beginning. And we were talking about this model even prior. We had no idea this pandemic was going to happen because of the fundamental reason that A, people are social, and B, there's the Omni show where you want to expand your lead base and your sales. What's the avenue for that? It just became like a natural extension. Right? That's why it was never our DNA was never virtual only. I never pursued that path.
If you have the registration integrated, it sounds like it was all integrated from the beginning, thinking about how am I going to bring in the physical audience with the digital audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Your registration becomes like your sign in, whether you're going to the physical or you're signing in on the online portal.
And Jimmy, what I heard you say too is that it really works well if it's marketed well, right? If you're driving customers to use the site, right?
Yeah. As an organizer, you have a marketing schedule. You send out newsletters, you do your social media campaigns, your Google AdWords, but you're always trying to manufacture content for all of those activities. Now you can go to your exhibitors and say, do you have something new? We would like to announce that you do. And you can populate that content with something current, not like trying to fabricate a trend story to put out in a newsletter or hire an influencer to pick their 6 favorite ceramics at the moment or whatever. It's real content where you can continue to service your exhibitors while still presenting new content. Perfect.
Your attendees.
And it reminds visitors why they love your show and why they want to come back next year. Oh, I can look forward to seeing that. So I think that's great. I actually think the workload from an organizer perspective is actually less. There's no need to scratch your head to figure out what content to put out anymore. You can actually use your exhibitors' new content, and that is simultaneously a great rebooking tool. Really nice.
On to what you can offer your exhibitors. You're helping them market too in that way.
Yes, and between the shows. So I like that a lot.
Yeah, great. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me today.
It's been an absolute pleasure.